November 2004. The city of Fallujah stood like a scar in the Iraqi desert. Smoke curled into the sky, black and heavy, blotting out the sun. The streets were choked with rubble, burned-out cars, and walls riddled with bullet holes. It wasn't just a city anymore, it was a fortress, and inside that fortress waited thousands of insurgents. For the Marines moving in, Fallujah wasn't a place on a map. It was a name whispered with the weight of death. Every alley was a trap, every rooftop could hide a sniper, and every shadow seemed to breathe. They called it Operation Phantom Fury. To the men on the ground, it felt less like a military operation and more like stepping through the gates of hell. Our story follows a small squad of Marines, 13 men, brothers forged not by blood, but by sweat, fire, and the long road that had brought them here. Some were veterans, carrying scars from earlier fights. Others were fresh faces, barely 20, their helmets too big, their rifles held just a little too tight. Together, they were one body, one will. Their orders were simple on paper: push through the northern district, clear house by house, secure the sector. But nothing about Fallujah was simple. The insurgents had dug in, preparing for this moment. Traps lined the doorways, machine gun nests covered the intersections, and foreign fighters poured in from across the Middle East to make a stand. The squad leader, Staff Sergeant Hale, looked over his men as they crouched behind a crumbling wall at the city's edge. He was the kind of Marine who carried himself like a storm contained inside a man. Calm, but deadly when released. He had the lines of age around his eyes, though he wasn't yet 40. Every man trusted him, not because he shouted the loudest, but because he never asked them to do anything he wouldn't do himself. "Remember," he told them, voice low, steady. "This city belongs to the dead until we take it back. Keep your eyes open. Trust your brother. We go slow, we go together, and we don't stop until it's ours." The men nodded. Some spat into the dust, others adjusted their gear, and one young Marine silently mouthed a prayer. Then the signal came. The thunder of artillery behind them shook the ground, and jets screamed overhead, dropping fire into the city's heart. The horizon burned. Hale gave a single nod. "Let's move." And just like that, 13 Marines rose and stepped into Fallujah. The sound hit them first, the distant chatter of gunfire, the dull thud of explosions, the sharp crack of sniper rounds finding their mark somewhere ahead. The air stank of cordite, smoke, and something worse, something human. The squad moved down a narrow street, rifles raised, eyes cutting through the dust. Shadows stretched long against the broken walls. A dog barked once, then fell silent. Somewhere a muezzin's call to prayer rang out, distorted by loudspeakers, echoing through the chaos like a hymn of defiance. For the men of this squad, it was the first step into a battle that would define them. Some of them would not leave this city alive. Others would leave but never be the same. And as the sun climbed over the smoking rooftops, one truth settled over every Marine in that squad. Fallujah was not a battlefield. Fallujah was a crucible. The squad had barely moved 2 blocks into Fallujah when the city reminded them whose ground they were standing on. It started with silence. The thick, unnatural kind of silence that presses against your eardrums until you realize it isn't silence at all. It's waiting. Hale raised his fist. The squad froze. Dust swirled lazily through shafts of sunlight, cutting across the broken street. Windows gaped like black eyes in the burned-out buildings. Then it hit. A deafening crack tore through the street as the first machine gun opened up from a second-floor window. Bullets chewed into the walls around them, throwing splinters of brick and plaster into the air. The Marines dove for cover, cursing, firing back in short, controlled bursts. "Contact front!" Hale's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Private Lewis, barely 19, hugged the ground as rounds snapped overhead. He fumbled with his rifle, heart hammering, hands shaking. Corporal Ramirez slid beside him, grabbed his helmet, shoved his face into the dirt. "Breathe, kid. You're no good to us dead." The squad split into fire teams, returning fire, their rifles barking against the stutter of the enemy's gun. Sergeant Hale scanned the rooftops, eyes narrowing, calculating. The insurgents weren't just shooting wild. They were trying to pin the Marines, box them in. And if that happened, they were done. "Smoke out!" a Marine shouted, tossing a canister into the street. White plumes billowed, blinding the enemy sight line. "Ramirez! Lewis! On me!" Hale barked. They bounded forward under cover of smoke, boots pounding broken pavement, hearts thundering louder than the gunfire. They kicked in the door of a house, swept through rooms, clearing them one by one with short bursts, and shouted warnings. The smell of dust, sweat, and gunpowder clung to the air. But the house wasn't empty. From the corner of a back room, a figure lunged, a man in black, AK raised. Lewis froze, eyes wide, finger locked. Before the shot could come, Ramirez shoved Lewis aside, his rifle roaring, cutting the insurgent down. Lewis stared at the body, chest heaving, reality crashing in. Ramirez leaned close, voice harsh but steady. "Snap out of it. You want to make it home? You pull that trigger." Outside, the rest of the squad pushed forward, street by street, doorway by doorway. Each corner was a gamble, each rooftop a question mark with life or death answers. The Marines weren't just fighting enemies, they were fighting the city itself. Then came the explosion. An IED buried beneath the rubble went off as two Marines crossed an alley. The blast threw them to the ground, bodies slammed into walls. One Marine screamed, clutching what was left of his leg. Blood sprayed across the dust, turning it into mud. "Medic!" Hale roared, dragging the wounded man into cover. Doc Simmons rushed in, hands already moving, tourniquet tightening, voice calm despite the firestorm. "You're not dying here, Marine. Not today." Above them, another machine gun opened fire. The sound of incoming rounds hammered the street. Hale cursed, grabbed the radio. "We need air on this grid now!" Minutes felt like hours. Then, the whine of jets cut through the sky. Bombs fell, shaking the earth, leveling the building that had held the insurgent gun nest. The street went quiet. Again, too quiet. The Marines looked at each other through smoke and dust. Sweat streaked their faces, eyes wide, adrenaline pumping. Hale's voice finally broke the silence. "This is Fallujah, boys. Get used to it." Fallujah didn't fight like a battlefield. It fought like a maze. Every house was a fortress. Every wall could hide a rifle. Every door was a coin toss between silence and sudden death. The squad moved methodically, house to house, room to room. Breach, clear, secure. Again and again, the pattern became a heartbeat, the sound of boots against tile. The crash of a door kicked open, the staccato bark of M16 fire, followed by the eerie stillness that came after. Inside one house, the air was thick with cooking smoke and dust. A table was still set with food, abandoned in haste. Hale signaled the team forward. Ramirez led, shotgun ready. He blew the lock, splinters flying, and the squad poured in. The first room was empty. The second wasn't. An insurgent opened up with an AK from behind a couch, rounds tearing into the walls. The Marines dropped instantly, returning fire. Lewis, still shaking from earlier, froze again, his rifle clutched but unmoving. Ramirez growled and shoved him down behind cover. "Move, damn it! Move!" Hale didn't hesitate. He slid low, pulled the pin on a frag, and tossed it clean over the couch. A muffled boom, then silence. The Marines advanced, eyes sweeping. 3 bodies lay still, but upstairs, more waited. As the squad climbed the narrow staircase, shots exploded downward. Plaster rained, wood splintered. One Marine staggered back with a bullet grazing his arm. Hale barked orders. Suppress! Suppress! Rounds hammered into the ceiling, forcing the insurgents back. Ramirez and another Marine bounded up, storming the second floor with brutal precision. The fight was over in seconds. Short, bloody final. By the time the squad regrouped outside, sweat ran down every face. Ammo was lighter. Their nerves were frayed. And yet, there was no stopping. The sun was setting, painting the city in a burning orange glow. Shadows lengthened across alleys where the smell of cordite and blood hung heavy. The Marines were exhausted, but exhaustion didn't matter. At one doorway, Simmons. The medic paused, pressing a bloody rag to the side of his neck where shrapnel had grazed him. Hale looked at him, and for a moment, the mask of iron cracked. These were his men. 13 had entered this city. He knew, deep down, all 13 might not leave. As darkness fell, they lit their NVGs, the world glowing green through the lenses. Every sound magnified the crunch of boots, the drip of water, the metallic clink of a rifle sling. And then the whisper came over comms. They're massing. From the rooftops ahead, movement flickered. Dozens of shadows. The insurgents weren't running anymore. They were gathering, preparing for a counterattack. Hale's voice was steady, but his men felt the weight of it. Get ready, boys. Tonight, Fallujah fights back. Night in Fallujah wasn't darkness, it was fire. Tracer rounds painted the sky red and green, carving arcs through the black like burning comets. Mortar blasts thumped in the distance, echoing through the maze of alleyways. The city was alive, breathing, hunting. The squad had dug in inside a 3-story house at the edge of a marketplace. Broken windows covered by sandbags, rifles pointed into the streets, shadows shifting across their NVGs. Then it began. A whistle cut the night 1, 2, 3. The first RPG slammed into the corner of the building, blowing out walls and filling the room with choking dust. Shouts erupted. Contact east! Insurgents swarmed from every alley, every doorway, dozens of them firing wildly, charging under the cover of chaos. Bullets hammered the building, rattling the bones of the Marines inside. Hold the line! Hale's roar cut through everything. His men answered with steel. Rifles spat controlled bursts, machine guns thundered, grenades arced into the night and blossomed into fire. Each Marine covered the other. Each Marine refused to give an inch. But the wave didn't stop. Through the smoke, a figure burst inside, screaming, AK blazing. Ramirez was the first to meet him. He slammed the man back with his shoulder, knife flashing in the chaos, ending it in silence. Another enemy came through a window, only to be met by Lewis, finally pulling his trigger, round stitching the shadow into the floor. Upstairs, Simmons crawled through dust to a wounded Marine, blood soaking the boards beneath him. He worked by touch, not sight bandages, morphine, pressure, while the fight shook the walls around them. His own uniform was soaked, but he kept moving, whispering, "Stay with me, Marine. Stay with me." The building shuddered as another RPG slammed home. A wall collapsed, smoke and fire pouring in. For a moment, it felt like the house itself was falling apart. Hale dragged a Marine back from the rubble, coughing, ears ringing, vision blurred. He spat blood, wiped his eyes, and kept firing. Outside, the street was a war zone. Insurgents pushed forward in waves, their chants echoing through the night. The Marines, outnumbered 5-1, fought like wolves with their backs to the wall. Each second was stolen with fire and fury. Then came the silence. The gunfire slowed. The shouting faded. Through the smoke, Hale saw figures pulling back, retreating into the alleys, not defeated, but waiting, watching. The Marines slumped where they stood, breathing hard, counting ammo, checking wounds. 13 had entered Fallujah. Now fewer stood, and still, dawn was hours away. Ramirez looked at Hale, eyes hollow but defiant. "They're not done." Hale nodded, gripping his rifle tighter. "Neither are we." And as the city smoldered around them, the squad braced for whatever the night still had left to give. Dawn broke over Fallujah like a cruel joke. The sky glowed pink, soft, and almost beautiful, while the streets below stank of smoke, blood, and cordite. The city was silent now, but it wasn't peace. It was exhaustion. The squad had survived the night. Barely. Their building was half rubble, sandbags torn apart, windows shattered into teeth. Inside, the Marines were shadows of the men who had entered, faces blackened by soot, eyes red from smoke, uniforms shredded and dark with dried blood. Hale walked the rooms in silence. He counted them the way commanders always do, not by names, but by presence. Ramirez sat on the stairs, knife still in hand, blade stained dark. Simmons, the medic, slumped against a wall, his own bandage seeping crimson, whispering to a Marine whose eyes no longer opened. Lewis cradled his rifle like it was the only thing tethering him to this world. 13 had gone in, 9 were left standing. The radio crackled. A voice. "This is Hammer 2. Reinforcements inbound. Sit tight." But there was nothing tight left to sit on. They had bled out their strength through the night. Still, when the sound of approaching engines finally reached them tanks, Humvees, the promise of steel and support, none of them cheered. They just stared, hollow and unblinking, as if part of them no longer believed in rescue. The relief force arrived, clearing the streets with firepower the squad could only dream of. But Hale's men knew the truth. Those tanks were hours too late. What mattered had already happened. What had been bought had already been paid. In blood, in brothers, in the silence of names that would never be spoken again. As they were pulled from the ruin, medics swarmed them, checking wounds, injecting morphine, asking questions. Hale brushed them aside. He wasn't hurt bad enough to matter, not compared to Simmons, who lay on a stretcher, whispering prayers. Not compared to Ramirez, who limped but refused to be carried. The city still burned. The fight wasn't truly over. But for this squad, their war in Fallujah had ended with the rising sun. On the roof of the vehicle carrying them out, Hale looked back one last time. The city skyline, jagged with smoke and fire, framed the battlefield they'd survived. He thought of the men they'd lost, their laughter on the eve of battle, their voices now silent forever. He didn't whisper their names. He didn't need to. They were carved into him, deeper than any scar. As the convoy rolled out, Ramirez broke the silence with a raspy laugh. "Hell of a night, Captain." Hale nodded, the ghost of a smile tugging his face. "Yeah, and we're still here." But in his heart, he knew the truth all warriors learn. Nobody walks away whole. The city had taken its price, and that price would be carried long after the smoke cleared. Fallujah didn't belong to either side. It belonged to the dead. And the living, they only borrowed it for one more day.